If you're a Socceroos fan and watched the ABC's coverage over the last week or so, you've probably come to one conclusion. The Australian national football team literally has some kind of god in its midst. This topic has obviously struck a nerve with many of you, and I want to say a quick thank you to everyone who sent in links, articles and thoughts about the last video. It turns out the national broadcaster was only just getting started. Behold the chosen one, Nestory Irankunda. Sure, the 20-year-old scored a goal in Australia's opening match against Türkiye, which is great, but at the end of the day, he's just a guy who kicks a ball around a field. Metcalfe is also a guy who kicks a ball around a field, and he also scored an incredible goal to seal the win. But in the eyes of the ABC's commentary apparatus, that goal effectively didn't happen. The only person who counts is Nestory Irankunda. Why? Well, I think we all know why, but this ABC headline makes it clearer. From refugee to Socceroos star, the grassroots club that gave Irankunda a go. Yes, because he was born in a refugee camp in Tanzania, in the ABC's eyes, he is more important than Metcalfe. Connor also has a history, as reported by the SMH. As a teen, Connor was half the size of everybody else. On Sunday, he made history. Or this one from the Newcastle Herald. This one's for you, the cute school beginnings of the Hunters World Cup hero. Yes, he too had an interesting history, but in the parallel universe of our unbiased ABC, Connor's history is the wrong history. Not to mention, he's got the wrong skin colour. Obviously, that's what we're all thinking. Do you think if Nestory Irankunda was a white South African whose farming family left the country because of racial violence and became a star Socceroo, the ABC would be aggressively telling his story? Not a chance. Just to be clear, I'm not here to bash Nestory. He's just playing football, and he's certainly not the sports editor of the ABC. This video is entirely focused on the national broadcaster's desperate obsession with identity politics, where players are treated less like athletes and more like political props to be divided into categories of who matters and who doesn't. In a recent article on the ABC's Religion and Ethics website, of all places, because nothing screams deep moral philosophy quite like a 20-year-old taking a shot on goal, they proudly declared, "When Nestory Irankunda scored, we were Australia." What the World Cup tells us about multiculturalism. Yes, when a former refugee scores in the World Cup, you better believe our ABC will dedicate an entire 3,000-word essay to explaining how diversity is our strength and multiculturalism is the absolute best. The article is written by somebody called M. Lewin, which isn't even their real name. Way down at the bottom, the ABC admits, M. Lewin is the pseudonym of a Canberra-based researcher practitioner working in the ACT Legislative Assembly. Originally from Burma, Myanmar, he holds a Master of International Security. Perfect, because nothing says voice of the ordinary football fan quite like publishing a massive lecture on Australian identity written by a Canberra political staffer with a master's degree. Of course, the article is fully fixated on identity politics. He wrote, "Before the match, we had gone to a Burmese restaurant because my partner had been asking for Burmese food. Burmese community, a Burmese restaurant, a Burmese food truck, a Burmese grocery store, familiar faces." Right, so regular Australians out in the suburbs aren't familiar faces, but people from his own specific background certainly are. He continues, "Burmese migrants rushing to a Burmese restaurant and all of us caring deeply about a national team made up of many different stories. We watched the match with takeaway Burmese tea. Then Nestory Irankunda scored. When the ball hit the back of the net, the room erupted. It was not just a goal, it was a release." It goes without saying that Nestory isn't Burmese, but the fact that he was a fellow non-white immigrant was enough for them to claim a bizarre collective ownership over his success. Further down in the article, he repeats this same sentiment. Our Burmese living room in Sydney felt completely Australian. Some of us still feel lost between two countries, not fully belonging here, no longer able to return there. Yet when Nestory Irankunda scored, there was no hesitation. We jumped, we shouted, we celebrated. That is belonging too. It's funny, but Connor Metcalfe is not mentioned a single time in this entire article. He also scored a goal to seal the actual victory, but apparently if you are a Canberra political staffer trying to find your sense of belonging, an Australian player who actually grew up here is completely unworthy of your celebration. If the goal is truly about connecting to a national team, ignoring half the goal scorers because they don't fit the migration narrative completely undermines your point. Naturally, it wouldn't be an ABC article unless you blame the right side of politics, complete with a completely unrelated picture of One Nation leader Pauline Hanson. He complains that migration has become a convenient explanation for almost every national stress. While the article goes out of its way to demonise the March for Australia rallies, complete with the caption, demonstrators hold Australian flags during the March for Australia anti-immigration rally. How dare they hold Australian flags in Australia? Then we get the mandatory mention of Aboriginal Australia, with the author writing, their current team looks like modern Australia, Indigenous history, migrant families, refugee journeys, and so on. And naturally, he finishes the entire piece by calling Australia racist, declaring, some days Australia feels like home, some days racism makes it feel conditional. But don't worry, because he adds, but last Sunday, for 90 minutes, the Socceroos gave me a version of Australia I could believe in. How incredibly generous of him. This country provides him with safety, shelter, a master's degree, and a taxpayer-funded job in a parliament house. But he can only bring himself to believe in Australia for 90 minutes because a black guy kicked a synthetic leather ball into a net. And finally, we have this article from our public broadcaster. How is the most culturally diverse World Cup ever being received in Trump's America? It celebrates black culture, it dumps on Donald Trump, and it checks every single progressive box you could possibly imagine. What else could you expect from a taxpayer-funded activist hub? Of course, they feature everyone's favourite new player, Nestory Irankunda, explicitly making sure to point out that he was born in a Tanzanian refugee camp. Because wow, I didn't think any of us have ever heard that detail before. Truly, thank you for bringing it up for the 100th time. Just below, they note that the Socceroos squad includes 4 former refugees and more than half of the 26 players have different cultural and ethnic backgrounds. Right, because when I tune in to watch an international sporting event, I'm not actually looking to see tactical execution, athletic endurance, or high-level football strategy. No, what I really want is a comprehensive demographic audit of the playing roster so I can accurately calculate the team's progressive equity score. But don't worry, because they even bring in scientific evidence to prove that diversity is our ultimate strength. They note, Dr. Ben Brindle, a researcher at the University of Oxford, said some studies had shown that more diverse teams were more successful on the pitch due to a larger talent pool and a wider array of physical attributes and playing styles. Right, so according to the expert logic of the ivory tower, if Australia just opens up selection to the entire global population, you'll build the greatest sporting team in human history. Which might be true, but it does raise an awkward question. At that point, is it actually an Australian team anymore? His logic does turn on its head a little bit when he has to admit that Argentina did not have a single foreign-born player in its 2022 World Cup winning squad. He simply notes, migration isn't necessarily the only way to get success. I think having Messi in your team probably helps as well. Brilliant. So the grand academic conclusion is that high migration completely guarantees footballing success. Except in countries where zero migration also guarantees footballing success. It turns out diversity is our strength, sometimes. And of course, the ABC finishes off the piece exactly how you would expect, with a photo gallery curated to emphasise a specific racial profile. So what have we actually learnt from all this? We've learnt that our public broadcaster is entirely obsessed with skin colour. We've learnt that Nestory Irankunda is the media's chosen one, while Connor Metcalfe, who achieved the exact same thing on the pitch, is completely ignored because he is a white bloke from Newcastle who didn't grow up in a refugee camp. The ultimate irony is that in their desperate rush to lecture us about social cohesion and how the Socceroos jersey belongs to everyone, the ABC is doing the exact thing they accuse their critics of doing. They're dividing the team and the country into arbitrary identity categories of who matters and who doesn't. They foolishly think that hyper-focusing on race will somehow fix division, when in reality they are actively exacerbating it. But the message behind it all is crystal clear. You will celebrate mass immigration, whether you voted for it or not.